Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the latest edition of Parker X. I had a really good time with this episode. I got a chance to sit down with Roamy Valera, the CEO of Pay by Phone, and we went through his 30-year history in parking. And I was quite fortunate to actually sit with him on the day of that 30-year anniversary, so it was a good time. We also went through everything that Pay by Phone is up to and everything that they're going to be doing. It was a good time, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks. All right, I'm Lester Mascot, and this is Parker X. And today we're sitting with Roamy Valera, CEO of Pay by Phone. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Doing
Yeah,
great.
Thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Good times.
So, just to jump right, I usually just jump right into things, so no reason to give a bunch of other stuff there. But to kind of take us through, your career, because you have an amazing career in this industry. I know.
No, I'm actually. You're mentioning my career, and I'm looking, literally looking at my watch just so I can be reminded what day it is today. So to tell you why I did that is today is my 30th anniversary in the industry.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And hard for me to believe it all started, 30 years ago in the city of Miami, and sometime around this time, 30 years ago, I was getting, was being taught how to write a parking ticket in the city of Miami.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's how I started. Looking for a job, and as a result of my wife working in a local bank, ran into the director of parking and said, "Hey, my boyfriend's looking for a job, and is there anything available?" And he says, "Sure, we're looking for somebody to write parking tickets." So she comes home and says, "I think I got you a job."
That's cool.
And I tell her, so and she tells me parking enforcement, and I'm like, please, that's a meter maid. So that's how it all started, yeah. And I had a great career at Miami Parking Authority, and my first.
You were there for a long time.
I did. Originally, I did 8 years,
Okay.
and my first 8 years, I had a couple of opportunities to get promoted. After a year and a half or so, I became the parking enforcement supervisor.
Okay.
I had a staff of about 30-something PEOs, and because I started there, it afforded me incredible credibility with the team. And next thing you know, they asked me to move on street, and then I started managing meter collection and maintenance and special events and off-street parking. So they allowed me an opportunity to literally go through the entire,
whole ecosystem of all the different things. Yeah.
And this is a time when parking was really static. So think about that. This
Yeah.
is an extremely manual process. Parking tickets were still written. You ripped the ticket off after you signed it, which was a great moment. If you're a parking enforcement officer, you get to tear that ticket, and the sound of the tear, right, as you put it in that windshield, gave you great pride. So extremely static process. And so what I gathered from that experience was learning the industry from the very basics, and the opportunity to learn how to lead and manage teams, with complex, responsibilities from a customer perspective. And it allowed me also the opportunity to see, to go from seeing the customer, in our industry, from being a violator to a consumer and a customer. And that's when I realized that this is an industry that was going to afford me an opportunity to make a living, and that I really enjoyed, etc. I got involved with the Florida Parking and Transportation Association, the New Jersey Parking Institute. A gentleman by the name of Steve Manetti and Lenny Beer gave me a call to I can go present on stuff that we were working on in Miami, which was, again,
Cool.
thinking is really more about management. How do you collect
Sure.
the meter? How do you keep the audit of a meter, right? So, and I started, enjoying these platforms to talk about what we were doing, and next thing you know, I had an opportunity with IPI at the time there to do training, frontline training. And I traveled the country for 3 years, training parking enforcement, parking attendants, etc. And again, another afforded opportunity to meet a number of folks in the industry who were leading organizations.
Sure, yeah.
And then at that time, the industry starts to change, and you can start noticing that meters no longer have handles. Now you could drop a coin, and it was digital this or digital that. Parking enforcement started to change with the digital
Automation started coming in off
automation
street,
off street, and things started to kind of get a little bounce, and so things continue to get interested, right, and interesting. And I find myself again with another opportunity to come back to the parking authority as the deputy executive director. And at that point, then it is all about economic development, and we're using parking as an economic development engine. And I'm leading that organization and operations with Art Noriega, who's still there, and we are now building parking garages in conjunction with the private sector. So things continue to evolve, and technology continues to make its entry right at that point. And I end up enjoying that for a few more years, and in the end, then I end up with Tim Haas and Associates as a consultant, leading and opening an office as an architect and engineering firm, which we had great success. And then I go back and decide that I want to go back to commercial operations, which is I rejoined Standard Parking at the time. And I'm tasked with leading to building a vertical in municipal operations, and I did that for about almost 9 years with them. We built.
You went through the transition to SP Plus.
Absolutely,
all that, yeah.
Absolutely. I was there, 4 years in. We the acquisition and merger with Central Parking.
Okay.
And which again gave me even a bigger platform to be able to, from a national perspective, right. I was tasked with the responsibility of building a vertical on a national level, and I did that. I enjoyed it. Had healthcare under me as well, a vertical, and higher ed. So I was exposed to the industry from different levels, different market sectors.
That's an invaluable experience.
Yeah, and so if I had to put it on in perspective, right, it was almost like they give you a syllabus at the beginning of your 30 years ago and says, hey, you're going to do all these things, and then at the end of the day, you're going to end up in a technology company, and you're going to lead a technology company in North America. I would have probably walked out of class.
Yeah, I went through the whole. I've always been on the park side, providing equipment, hardware, software. And being able to start in the field and actually see how everything gets put together, doing service work and then project management, going through all that, I wouldn't give that experience up for anything. It was everything that you just know, right?
Yeah.
You know these things when you're working on them.
And it's always enjoyable when you talk to guys like yourself. You say, when you look back, right, you've seen the progress and you've seen how this whole thing has evolved, and you start to see, the impact of all these many things that have come together and starting to making it a different industry. So from my perspective, I tell people, my legacy is phenomenal. I love the legacy, but I'm using that legacy to be able to build and shift focus as to what our industry is going to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and not allow that legacy to stop me from thinking or being a little different in the thought process.
I think the discussions we're having with clients just from 2 years ago to now are just completely different.
Completely different. We're talking about it's our apples and oranges from all that perspective. Again, thinking so static, and now everything is so completely dynamic, and everything we're doing is based on a data strategy. People want to know,
it's available. If you make a decision without looking at the data first,
exactly.
Why would you?
Well, how long was the transaction? Why was it that long? Could it be things that we're asking ourselves that we're capturing, right? And then we're trying to find a solution with some of the data we're collecting, so we can make it a different experience. Because at this point, it's that consumer base.
So now you're with Pay by Phone.
Yeah.
How long has it been now?
I joined the company in December 1st.
Okay.
Between when I ended up with SP Plus, I decided, I had a corporate career of about 9 years, and I was an executive of the company, and I had the best job in the country, no question about it. I loved everything about it, and a great company, and they were very supportive, allowing me to be involved in the industry, the IPMI, et cetera. And other state and regional associations, love speaking, in conferences, et cetera. And it came to a point where I thought, I always wanted to do something on my own, and then decided I was going to open, my own consultancy advisory firm, which was just me. And then a few months later, my son kind of joined me because he had spent a year in writing parking tickets in the city of Miami as well.
So I think when I was with that Century, we engaged with you for help when we were in Florida.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Absolutely. We worked on a project together. Exactly right. And that's that. I did that for about 20 months, and part of that, Pay by Phone was a client. And next thing VWFS, who owns Pay by Phone, acquired Pay by Phone, got extremely active with the company, and signed a global president and CEO and Andy Gruber, which I just, who I had started to kind of have some conversations about what my role was. And next thing you know, we're having a conversation in Vancouver, which is completely about, what we want you to consider, the North American market and joining our company. And the reason I did was, at first it was, I was humbled by Andy's, offer that he thought I was capable of kind of charting a new course for the company. But what was really exciting was just where the industry is going to be at, right? As it relates to technology and payment and payment options, and that I could have an impact in a very small role, but that I could have an impact based on my experience and, with the network that I had to be able to play a role. And it was really, really exciting for me.
I'm very excited about where the industry is going, and then the challenge of finding out where we provide value along the way.
Exactly. I think what's changed drastically from my perspective from the optics has been there's a real focus on the consumer. Yeah. And historically, I think you and I both worked in the side where we were focused on the client and providing the client, the tools.
Sure. No one had a relationship with the consumer.
No one did. There was no way to measure that, right? Other than a complaint that came in occasionally from the mayor's office or to your boss, right? And they say, Roamy is not responding. But it was it's an afterthought. It was kind of like we ran this somewhat as a monopoly. It's like you have a choice, yes or yes. But that has changed because of the market has been extremely open and
I think
competition.
Your parking has become part of your trip.
Exactly. It is part of the experience.
Yeah. You start planning for it now.
Exactly.
Before you leave.
Think about, in hospitality, like obviously hotels started to understand that they wanted to have, the valet to become an extension of the hotel, right?
Sure.
And then they started training these valet drivers as, doormans and et cetera, right? So front of house kind of thing. And they started changing the perception that it was an experience extension of the hotel, and then we in the on street or off street we started kind of thinking, if we want to compete in that environment, private operators where I was at, if we want to go out and get a contract with a hotel, we better understand that those are the dynamics that they're dealing with, which is consumer based.
Yeah, absolutely. You start seeing, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So Pay by Phone. When I first started Pay by Phone, I'd heard of them. Obviously, it's a great name.
Great name. Yeah.
Kind of says everything right there. But for some reason I always thought of others when I thought of like these bigger, larger companies, and like all of a sudden overnight, it seems like, at least from my perspective, like Pay by Phone has emerged as the monster.
Well,
in a good way, right?
Yeah,
Just all of a sudden,
it's in a great way, and part of it is it helps that your parent company is Volkswagen Financial Services, right?
Yeah, that helps.
It's a huge deal. But what's really important, and I think why it's become it's a rebirth of the brand, and at least in North America, we're a global brand. So, we're the leader in France, we're a leader in the UK, and we're expanding into other countries in Europe. But the reason it resurfaces and there's a rebirth of this brand is because of the fact that there's a focus on mobility from, not only from VWFSS but also from us here. Right, we understand that how we move from point A to point B is changing and has changing, and we can help do that.
So what all aspects does Pay by Phone cover now with the consumer?
We got a number of different products, but the focus has always been removing and reducing the friction that it takes for a consumer to literally complete a parking session. And that to us has been why we've seen the app rating be so high in the iOS store, like 4.9, 160,000 reviews, or 4.8 in Android, etc. But because of the fact that we've made that experience, 1, 2, 3, multiple languages. If you still pick up the phone and call and do a transaction on the phone if you like, and there's a market for that. So. If you have an issue, you can still pick up the phone and get a live person. So we've again, going back to the original point, consumer focus has been why it's become so interesting and so successful for us.
I mean, people always will gravitate towards the the thing that requires the least amount of effort
Absolutely.
to handle, especially when it's something they really don't want to have to deal with to begin with. You're just going to move towards that kind of effortless, easy transaction you get to go deal with. So any way you can pull friction out of a situation, it's going to be a win. And if you can improve some revenues at the same time, then you really...
Yeah, and what we've done is we've identified, again, keeping an eye on the client, which we've never lost focus, but understanding the consumer. So a good example is the city of Miami, and they're collecting 93%, 92% of their revenues is all through the Pay by Phone app.
Really?
Yeah, and
is it on and off street or just for on?
For on street.
Okay.
And then to think about the fact too that they've been able to do that, and there have been 50,000 downloads of the app in Spanish. So multiple language. Again, consumer focus. And this would have been this would have been a sector of that, although it's 50,000, right? But this would have been a sector that otherwise could have probably not interacted with the technology. But we made a conscious effort to add Spanish, right? And we've added multiple languages, but to add a language where we can again reduce that friction and people can feel comfortable being able to navigate that.
That's really a company culture too. I mean, it has to be a company culture as well for that to really work, and it sounds like it is.
Absolutely. It's again identifying where are the areas of opportunities that we're missing, right? So take Vancouver for example, where there's a significantly high adoption rate as well, and we're doing processing over 1.3 million transactions a month.
Wow.
But there's a sector of the community that speaks
French,
Mandarin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we're targeting that sector by adding Chinese Mandarin, right? And that is again focus on the option is, well, don't worry about it, it doesn't really, it's maybe a small sector of the community, but we've seen the results in Miami with 50,000. I can assure you that if we have that same success, then that increases the adoption and it increases the experience for that consumer.
It really speaks to your guys' dedication, because character-based languages have always been challenging.
Absolutely.
In automation and that sort of thing. So that's cool.
We take great pride. Our team takes great pride to be able to say, hey, we're reaching a different market that otherwise wouldn't have reached. And again, when I think of Spanish, we're reaching, my grandmother, like in Miami, that would tell me, I would use the app, but I don't really understand it. And at that point, then why are we going to exclude her from that experience?
Because I think a lot of people that English isn't their first language, a lot of them can speak it well, but when it comes to the reading and writing side of it, that's perfect.
And doing so in a technology, right?
Yeah.
So which is again, that's what we're trying to do. Is really how do we focus on the adoption so we can remove that friction and increase the efficiencies of our client. So our client is focused, our consumers are happy.
So is your focus always on street, or is there any off-street elements?
No, we've deployed an off-street solution out in France, and we're getting ready to do the same here in the U.S. One of the things is we got maps, and and we've had other options of things that we can add to the app, but always focus that we're really, really cautious that we don't want to remove or impact how the consumer views the experience, and keeping it extremely simple. So for example, imagine, I have multiple vehicles in my app, right? Because you could do that.
Yep.
And of course, 3 of my vehicles are my kids. And many of times I get the call from my daughter, says, I don't have money in my account, but can you please pay for my parking? And I'm in zone, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here I go, and I go to my app. There's a picture of her car. So I hit parking session, enter the zone, etc. She's parking. And then I get another text from my daughter, says, "Hey, don't forget to to extend my parking." So I get a text now from the app that says, "Hey, extend your parking." So what it has done for me is it's enhanced my communication with my daughter. We speak more about parking now.
That's cool. So what's new coming from Pay by Phone?
Yeah, so I think you may have heard the announcement, Amazon Echo.
I did.
So audio recognition in the car. Where one of the skills that Amazon Echo is going to add is the Pay by Phone technology, which is about parking. So we've always heard the term that parking is going to become a dashboard event. But, we know it's a phone event, right? So if you have a PDA, it continues to be a phone. So at this point, you can use your Amazon Echo to basically start and begin a session in parking, which is really, really exciting for us. And what it says is just our focus on what's happening with the vehicle, and that
really speaks really well to the organization too, because when you think about I always go back to like the App Store when like the iPhone first came out. Like that was this green field for like app development, and that's where voice is right now.
Exactly.
Like on the Alexa voice skills, that's like a completely green field for app development.
Yeah, it really is. It's a game changer, from
100%.
From our perspective, and it can now really move from so if you're thinking about from a safety perspective, right? It removes the fact that you no longer need your eyes on your dashboard or on your phone, right? For that matter.
I'm super excited about it because I've always wanted this situation where I could be at my house. I could say, I want to go to dinner.
Yeah.
I get the reservation for dinner, and it's like, hey, I want to park.
Yeah.
Within like 500 feet of where I'm going, and like sort that out, and then have that like flow from right into my home, right into my car, and just have it be this kind of.
If you choose, right? Because the technology allows you. If you choose, once you drive up, it'll literally say, hey, you're in zone 1 or 2, and all you have to say is, I want to park in. I start my parking session because
easy.
It really is. So
wow.
It's now we're down to reducing that friction even further, right? So the interactions even further, which is really, really exciting because everything is that we're going to focus about. I think the future of what we're going to see from an on-street perspective is really going to be about compliance.
Sure.
So compliance, TNCs are going to have to comply. Micro mobilities are going to have to comply. And that compliance meaning about touching the curb, whether we do it from on a per session basis, or do we do it on a registration basis, et cetera. But there's going to have to be a time for that. And I get asked the question, why? And the reason is, because there's great conflict for that curb. And every time that there's great conflict and great demand, things have to be managed. And that's just the reality of it.
So how do you feel like for pay by phone? Because, there's a lot of cities, there's a lot of pressure to monetize the curb, and they're actually removing parking spaces from the curb to make room for, like I said, the TNCs, delivery, that sort of thing. So, at some point, there's going to be less inventory on the curb.
I don't know if it's going to be less. I think it's going to be reassigned inventory.
Can you become part of that transaction for like a delivery?
Absolutely.
So UPS or FedEx wants to deliver. Cities want to monetize that.
Exactly. So think about so when we're talking, the industry talks about dynamic pricing, congestion pricing. We're talking about a dynamic curb, and this is a digitized curb. So from a map perspective, when you look at your map, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., that's transient parking. But before 8 a.m. is loading zone or commercial parking, and after 8 p.m. is residential parking. So imagine.
That sounds like San Francisco.
Exactly. But now you're digitized, right? And some cities, some major cities are much more advanced in that. But this could happen, in any city, small town, that still they have just as much conflict and just as much demand as San Francisco does, just as smaller scale. And they do need a solution, and they do need to manage that. And and it's we're gonna focus to continue to play a big role in that.
I think that would be huge to actually focus on all those other uses of the curb.
Absolutely.
Any idea to move towards like residential management, like the residential parking plans?
We're doing
plans.
Yeah, we're doing that. We're doing that in a number of cities. But when I go back home where I live in Miami, but so the residents of Miami. This is a useful tool, right, for cities when there was a need to increase the rates, the on-street rates. The city agreed that then the rate was not going to impact the residents; it was going to impact visitors, et cetera. So, residents register through our app, and they are validated as residents. And when they do park, they get a significant discount for parking as a resident. So and there's resident parking programs, in their neighborhoods as well, where you have to interact as a visitor with the app. If not, if you're not a registered resident, then you obviously get a citation.
It always surprises me what you have to, like, if you park in a certain area, like where there's a residential parking program, like the owner has to go onto some website and print off like a permit.
No. That's all incredible friction and frustration.
It really is.
Frustration.
You never do it right.
Imagine someone saying, "Hey, man, I'm outside," and hold on, don't park yet. I'm gonna go print your pass, or I'm gonna go register you. That just doesn't work. That's not a good experience.
No, it's not.
No.
Wow. So when will the app be rolled out, or is it already released?
No, we're released.
It's done.
Yeah. That's
but the Amazon Alexa skill.
Oh yeah, that So we announced it, and we're just getting ready to roll that out. That's just that the deal is done. So we're now working on just getting it and making it available.
So the Alexa Fund just recently invested in ParkWiz as well.
Yeah.
How's that? Is there a conflict there, or is it going to be similar services, or?
No, we view the industry as an industry that is it's extremely fragmented as it relates to all these payment options and systems and things of that nature. Yeah, and our focus is we want to make sure that that we can compete in a platform that allows all these different payment options and opportunities, and that it is the consumer that makes that decision of who they're going to use. So you may remember this, but I'm old enough to remember that at one point I had a check card for my bank, and that check card had had a brand on it, and you could only withdraw money in that in that bank or that cash machine, right? Well, that's gone. Now you could be anywhere in the world and go to the ATM and take out cash, and they'll connect you to your bank, and there'll be fees, etc. But at some point here, this platform has to play a role where then the consumer chooses, and then we're going back to when we started, focus on the consumer and the touch point with the consumer, and that's where we see this. So
it's super exciting.
Absolutely,
that's cool.
Absolutely.
How should people reach out to Pay by Phone? What's the best way? Just through the website, or?
Yeah, our website. We have multiple ways to get in touch with us, but sales at Pay by Phone. It goes to everyone in the organization, and we respond immediately. And I know our call our offices as well. Our app has a phone that literally goes to a live customer support service. So even if you want to transact by phone, you can still do that.
I love that, just because it's not up to us how people want to do business with us.
Yeah.
And if we can make as many channels open as possible and be able to provide an experience for
consumer choice.
Yeah.
Consumer choice.
That's awesome. Well, hey man, thank you for stopping by. This has been fun.
Thank you for inviting me. And it's I get to celebrate my 30 year anniversary with you. So couldn't be
Happy
better.
anniversary.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Really, really having a good time doing this, and I'm super happy with the reception it's gotten from our industry, and I'm just amazed by the number of followers and listeners that we get that grows seemingly every week. So thank you. Please give feedback, please subscribe, and keep listening. Thanks.